So I'm standing on the existing driveway for our project, and one of the considerations that clients had was how to kind of sort of reimagine this space in a sustainable way. The current driveway has some large cracks, it's got some discoloration in a few spots, and they were worried that if they redid everything else but left the concrete driveway the way it is, it would look a little bit out of place and wouldn't match the new layout. So they had pondered initially ripping the concrete out and putting in some pavers or pouring a new concrete driveway, which can be not necessarily a cheap proposition. So one of the suggestions I had made was, let's just kind of reimagine this space with the existing material, and we came to the solution of just cutting the existing concrete. So we created the pattern for the concrete cuts in a way that this crack will happen right in the middle of where one of our cuts are, and it'll be removed. So it's kind of a strategic way to eliminate these cracks in a new design. Besides the aesthetic benefits of making these cuts, it will also make the concrete driveway more permeable. So we'll have less stormwater runoff going to the driveway and into our local creeks and streams. Most driveways have oil dripping from cars or pollutants coming from the gutters or the house. So by limiting the water from going into the drains, it can be managed here on site. The roots and the plants can sort of bioremediate some of those chemicals, but the idea being we're keeping all stormwater on site where it can be managed and not going into our waterways. So here at Bay Maples, we're always looking for creative and unique ways of repurposing materials. And over the years, we've developed some really innovative techniques for repurposing concrete. And as you can see in the background, we are polishing the driveway and doing some cutting, and basically gonna reimagine the same material, but just give it a whole new look and make it look like something that actually is not repurposed, even though it is. So here's a little side-by-side comparison of this is what the concrete looked like before it was polished. You can see it's kind of rough, unsmooth surface. And here next to it, after it was polished, it's very smooth. The aggregate's been polished out. Very similar to what you'd see like on a concrete countertop. And then later on, once the polishing is done, we're gonna be filling in these voids right here with a decorative rock that'll be permeable and fill in this gap, and then that way a car can drive over the top of it. So the big day has arrived. We are ready to spread our gravel and epoxy mix into the sections of concrete that we previously cut. Similar to getting ready for paint, we've taped off and papered off all the areas that we don't want to get dirty, and we're applying our epoxy gravel finish. It might look like we're drying some fruit out here, but we're actually trying to clean the gravel. So for the epoxy to work correctly, there needs to be no dirt and no moisture on it. So one of the tricky parts is you want to use water to get the dirt off, but then you can't have the water be part of the glue. So we first kind of wash it on our screen, and we then let it dry to then get the moisture off. And that leaves us with a very nice, dust-free, water-free gravel mixture, which we then put into our wheelbarrow, and then we'll mix with the epoxy and gravel before we spread it. So I guess the best way to describe what we're doing is basically like making Rice Krispie treats. Really similar process is we're just adding our epoxy glue, mixing it in with the pebbles so it gets coated on all sides of it, and that's what's going to allow them to glue together. So then we go to pour it between the cracks, it all sticks together, and it's going to dry very much like a Rice Krispie treat. So it's going to be all one solid unit, but have the kind of pores in it to allow the water to flow through. The instructions do have very specific weight to a ratio, but I just use the eyeball measurement. So here it is, the completed driveway, and we are testing to see how it's working during a rain event, and things are working quite well. The water is intended to come down here, flow into these cuts that we've made, and then direct towards the garden. And it's actually working quite well, and in some respects almost too well, because it's pooling here at the bottom of the garden, which is okay, as long as it's not going into the street. which is our intended goal, to keep it here in the garden where it can percolate into the soil, be uptaken by the roots of the plants. So in the future, what we may do is excavate this a little bit more, giving the water a little bit more space. But this is definitely proof of concept that our goal of keeping the water on site is working as planned.